That's not out of any responsibility that I end on time. It's just to give you all hope. Thanks, Lee. I'm a grateful, enthusiastic, and very active member of the Al-Anon family groups. My name is Jack Carpenter. I'm honored to be here. I was here in 2010. I had to look it up. 12 years ago, I was privileged to come here and hang out with some cool people. And, you know, the best part of doing this when you come to talk at a conference is not this part. This is the downside. This is the price you pay for the good part, which is hanging out with the people in AA and Al-Anon who are chopping wood and carrying water. The speakers, the members of the committee, the folks that are doing all this stuff, you guys got some kind of a color code system on here that these things mean something. I haven't heard the announcement yet, but I think it's a great idea. I don't know how long you've been doing it, but all your speakers have a red badge on. And we've been doing this in Al-Anon for 100 years. It's called the Alcoholic Tag and Release Program. So we can be aware of your proximity at all times. So Beverly and I have red badges. We're the red herring in that, just to keep you on your toes. Diane, thank you so much for inviting me to come and do this. Steve, for all the hard work he does. The committee. What a privilege to be here with the speakers that are on this roster. My friend Beverly and I, who you do not miss her talk tomorrow. We started traveling and doing this stuff together over 30 years ago, and maybe I'll try and get to the story. I'll tell you, never know what I'm going to talk about. We were outside before the meeting, and I gave Dan the binder for the meeting, and I was told to give it to Dan. There's a lot of readings in there. He can read as little or as much as he wants. He can get people to do it. And his idea was, I'm just going to read the steps and get right to it, give you more time. And I said, and then it was Andy who reminded me that when we'd been together, maybe at Evansville, that sometimes when you travel around the country, you'll hear this. You go to a meeting, they read all the 12 steps in the meeting, and then they read the tradition of the month. And this conference we were at, they were starting every meeting by reading the steps and reading one tradition. And I pulled them aside and I said, I'd like to make a special request. I'd like to ask you to read all 12 traditions. And there's a reason for that goes way back to the earliest days of my beautiful wife's sobriety, and I hope I get to share that with you. Last night, Jimmy got up here to talk. People ask me all the time. They'll call me up and say, I just got asked to speak at a meeting. I've never done it before. What do I do? Or I got asked to speak at a conference. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And I tell them all the same thing. If you're an alcoholic at an AA meeting and you're up at this podium like Jimmy was last night, if you're a studier of the human condition, you look around the room and they're all leaning forward in their seat. And they're waiting for exactly one thing to happen. And when that happens, they'll be okay and they can relax. And Jimmy took care of that right away. Jimmy got up there and he said, I'm an alcoholic and I drank. And you watched, it was like a shock wave after a nuclear blast sweeping through the ground. From the front of the audience to the back, they all went, yeah, and they laid back in their seat, and they're all okay. They heard what they needed to do. That guy drank too. I'm okay. If you're a member of Al-Anon, they're leaning forward in their seat. Y'all are doing it now. You don't know you're doing it. I'm watching you. You're doing it. You're waiting for exactly one thing. I'm going to have to tell you that there was an alcoholic. Well, I'm going to do better than that. It's my great privilege to introduce you to my beautiful wife, Leslie, who's right there. Who, if she doesn't break out in a drastic drunk by the end of this month, will have 34 years of continuous sobriety in AA. And I have it on good authority that she apparently did that without my help. The other reason I had her stand up is not so you feel sorry for me, so you'll understand that they don't all look like they're supposed to. She should have had a brown paper bag and skull and crossbones tattooed on her forehead to indicate how dangerous she was. If alcoholics looked like that, we wouldn't need Al-Anon, but they look like that. They come in this really lovely package with a whole lot of baggage dragging behind them, and it was some exciting times that happened with that. In the earliest days of her sobriety, I was not smart enough to go to Al-Anon. Her and her sponsee, I call her AA's answer to Lizzie Borden, the scariest woman in Alcoholics Anonymous, was her sponsor. People were terrified of Pat. Pat, y'all be chatting before the meeting. There's this like pleasant hum going on in the room, people talking and chatting, talking to your sponsor, whatever. Pat had come through that door, and a hush would roll over the room. Everybody checking to see how Pat's doing. She was scary sober. I liked Pat immediately. Pat was mean to my wife. She was hard. Pat was hard. And it was apparently what my wife needed to get sober, be sober, and stay sober, was a woman who just was, she loved her enough to tell her the truth, whether it hurt or not. A lot of it hurt. I think the first time my wife shared at a meeting, she said, Pat came up to her and said, that was selfish and self-centered. I don't want to hear you ever share at a meeting again. Sit down and shut up. I loved Pat. She go into AA and they said, we just got a job opened up. We want a new secretary. And my wife said, I want to volunteer for that. And Pat leaned over. She said, we don't want you. Put your hand down. But here's what Pat did. I've never been to a meeting. I've never been to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon ever. My wife goes to Pat and she says, I think I'm ready to work the steps now. You sponsor people in the program. Is everything you want in life is when they come to you and say, I'm ready to do the work. I'm willing to do the work. Let's go. That's what, as a sponsor, what we live for. She went to Pat and she said, I'm ready to do the steps now. And Pat said, oh, honey, you so are not ready to do the steps. You do not work and play well with others. You're going to do the traditions first. My wife's in early sobriety. We're not getting along too good, but the ideas, the concepts, the practices of those traditions began to come into my home and affect my life before I had any idea what they were. Beverly talked about it this morning in her workshop about applying the traditions in your relationships and in your marriage. I will tell you that I've done a rigorous trip through the steps with my sponsor. I've done countless numbers of trips through the steps with people that I sponsor. And the end result of the steps was that for the first time I became right size ever in my life with me and with God. My experience was that the only significant thing that happened is for the first time I'm right size with me and I'm right size with God. That had never happened before. My relationship at home isn't good. She drank. She drank a lot. I didn't like her. I liked her at first. Our first date, I found out you pour alcohol in, her clothes blew off all over the room. It doesn't take much to get a commitment out of me. I thought, good enough to go, let's launch this ship. And then she, the drinking goes from fun with problems to problems, and I'm in the middle of problems. I don't like her when she drinks. But I'm not thinking about coming to you. I don't even know about you yet. And then she's completely screwed up my life and got sober. That was the end. She's drinking. I got the moral high ground. I'm ahead on points. Remember the point system? I'm ahead on points every day. She's sorry every day. And my wife is a hope to die, blackout alcoholic every day. Arbutus O'Neill from Brownwood, Texas, she died with 62 years in Al-Anon. She was a dear friend of mine. She said, my husband was a blackout alcoholic. I hope that yours was a blackout alcoholic. If you didn't have a blackout alcoholic at home, I feel sorry for you. Having a blackout alcoholic is as handy as having a pocket on a shirt. Anything that goes wrong in your life, it's their fault. Now, she wakes up sorry every morning. She don't even know why. She blacked out last night, but I wake up mad. That's my natural position is to be spring-loaded in the pissed-off position. So when I wake up in the morning, she has to assume, because she has no memory of last night, that it must be something she did, and she's sorry. You know what it means when she's sorry? I got a little bit of control. I got the checkbook, the calendar, the TV clicker. That was the last thing I gave up. My sponsor finally made me let go of the TV clicker. I still haven't let go of it all the way. I've got the moral high ground. I'm ahead on points. You get all the home cooking, make all the decisions, all the sex you want, because she's sorry. She comes to live with me and she says, I have a rule. Oh, here we go. We just now got our toothbrush in the bathroom and now there's rules, right? I'm not sure we're going to have. I just came out of a marriage I hadn't been happy in. And she's got rules. I said, okay, what's the rule? She said, nobody's allowed out of this bed in the morning until we've had sex. It's a high price to pay. but I'm willing to live with this rule. My wife is a blackout alcoholic who misbehaves, and in her world, if in the morning I was willing to have sex with her, I was either over it or I was going to get over it. And it was her security blanket because she had no idea what was happening the night before. This is what my life looks like. I got no reason to come to you. My life is good. Drinking's good. I don't like her much, but I got somewhat of the illusion of control in my house. And then she gets sober. She screws it all up. I come home from a trip and she's sober. Everything is different. First of all, she doesn't sleep for a year. And now she's got opinions about stuff that she feels is necessary to share with me. She comes home from AA and she said, they told me at AA my brain is broken and that I can never trust anything that comes out of there. I thought, okay, she said, and this is what I think we need to do about this. And I'm going, whoa, what happened to the broken brain theory, right? And she's Ms. Pac-Man chasing me through the house. I'm fleeing the house because I don't want to put my hands on her. On 2 different occasions in sobriety, I jumped on my motorcycle and wheelied it through a 6-foot closed chain link gate fence to get away because I was afraid I was going to put my hands on her, to get out to flee my house. Work all week. Saturday we're together. Saturday night she's calling her dad, asking to come home. Her dad's saying, oh, honey, stay there. Jack really loves you. She's saying, I did my shift, honey. You're Jack's problem now. Don't come home, right? And I'm looking for some place to put her, and it's not good. And the idea of those traditions began to come in and began to soften the blow of a house where everybody's the wrong size. Remember what I said about the steps making me right size with me and with God? The application of those steps, which came to us first because of her, for the first time began to make us the right size with other people. The right size with your spouse, with your employer, with the people in the 15-item or less line, with the people in the diamond lane on the freeway going 40. For the first time in my life, the application of those ideas began to make me the right size in the rest of my world. Now, in that world that I described during the drinking, this is what we are. Moral high ground, head on points. She'll never catch up. She'll owe me forever for holding her hair when she was puking in the toilet and calling her boss and making excuses and writing her correspondence at work because she became functionally illiterate behind her alcoholism up here. She's a blackout drinker, sorry every day, and she's down here. I had absolutely no idea. I was at a conference one time. Sandy Beach was there, was one of the speakers. Deb Kay was there. We had all these fabulous speakers, and they do workshops all day long. And I don't know anybody, and I haven't spoken yet, and they do step workshop, tradition workshop. And I'm in line at the thing and it's going on right now, and I went to the first one, I went to lunch during the second one, same presenters, and these ladies in front of me in line said, oh, I just love the conference, and all the people sharing on the steps, and Sandy on spirituality, but my God, the traditions workshop is so dry. And I'm standing behind them. Nobody knows me. And I said, did you know that those traditions could get you laid? Both of them spun around what do you mean by that? I said, you'll have to come to the workshop this afternoon to find out. And what I told them in the workshop is that when your relationship looks like this, when somebody's the daddy and somebody's the little kid, and then it switches because the shoe gets on the other foot occasionally, and it switches, this is not conducive to a partnership, it's not conducive to intimacy, it's not conducive to all the things I really want in a relationship in my marriage. But when you start to pry it down to this by applying those traditions, common welfare means everybody, but one authority is not Jack. Our group conscience, which I hope to get to in a minute, when you start to be this size, this opens the door for the first time in my life to a level of communication, partnership, intimacy, and sex that never existed anywhere in my life before that, because for the first time, everybody is a full citizen. Full citizen. Sponsor guys when the wife takes off. She says, I've had enough of you, I'm out of here, I'm going to go drink. And then she changes her mind, wants to come back, and they call me up and say, I'm thinking of letting her back in the house. I ask them a question. Is she coming back in on probation? Is she coming back as a full citizen? Does she have a voice and a vote in the house as a full citizen of the house? If she's coming back so you can watch her, If she's coming back as a reward because she maybe went to some AA meetings or something, and she's coming back so you can keep an eye on her, she's not coming back as a full citizen. Don't let her back in the house. Everybody in my house is a full citizen. And it's because of the application of those traditions which came into my life a long time before the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And just because I'm thinking of it, I'm going to tell you some of the history of it. One of my favorite, I'm a historian, I get lost in it and try not to take off on a tangent. I study the history of Al-Anon and AA. Lois Wilson, when she talked about the history of Al-Anon, said, I make no apology for the fact that the history of Al-Anon sounds an awful lot like the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it is, and they're the same thing. The traditions were formulated when Bill became aware of the idea that Bob's health was declining. He was a lot older. Bill wasn't sure if the fellowship would survive him, and he became desperate to give the fellowship to itself. So if something happened to him, and as was going to happen to Bob, took place, that it wouldn't leave with him. And he started writing out the traditions. I think it might have been Father Ed Dowling that helped him edit the book. And he wrote them out, and he published them in the AA Grapevine, 1 or 2 traditions a month. And he published them before the International in 1950. And they were all out there. People would call him Bill and say, will you come talk at our meeting? And Bill said, I would love to come and talk at your meeting. And they said, Bill, please don't talk about those traditions. Bill, oh, of course not. He would show up and he'd talk about their traditions, and he's trying to drive their traditions down the throat of the fellowship. At the International, I think it was in St. Louis, 1950, over the course of the weekend, it's Bill's fellowship and Bill's conference. He's running the show. They'd do a talk or do something would happen, and he'd have a couple of guys come up and they would read 2 of the traditions. They just read what he wrote in the Grapevine, and they'd sit back down. 6 pairs of 2 people got up and read the tradition and sat back down. And then one of the greatest stories of manipulation I've ever heard in recovery, at the end of the conference, Bill said, the traditions you have heard and have had read, there being no objection or adopted as read, and he banged the gavel. There was no debate, there was no group conscience, there was absolutely no question. He was turning it over. He was my idol. He is my idol then and now for the greatest, because without that, I don't think we're here. Without that, I don't have the relationship I have with my wife, with my son, my alcoholic son, with my alcoholic daughter, with my family who are still out there drinking. I don't have that relationship with any of them without that happening and coming into my life. I will tell you, just by way of history and because it's entertaining, that 3 weeks ago I had in my living room 2 homicide detectives for Los Angeles PD. About 2.5 years ago, I was at work working on a TV show, and these 2 cold case murder detectives show up and ask my producer of my movie, everybody knows me in this job, if they can interview me. So I go into the catering building, and word spreads through the company that Jack is being interviewed by 2 LAPD homicide detectives in the catering tent. And the rumor mill goes wild. It was crazy, and I just let them talk. I just, whatever they want to believe, I let them do it. Some of them walked white circles around me for the rest of the year. And I asked them, what's going on, and they said, we want to talk about your Uncle Mont. My Uncle Mont was an alcoholic. He was my great uncle. He's my dad's uncle. And he's a rough, tough, hard drinking, hard partying, hard riding cowboy that my dad idolized. And I remember him when I was a little kid. And we'd have family functions, a lot of drinking, partying happened in my family, and Mont would show up with his wife and his daughter, and that's what happened. Everybody drank except my parents. I'm not sure what that's about. My grandparents are alcoholic, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, cousins, not my parents. They were deeply affected by alcoholism in their parents, but nobody drank in my house except for those that came there. And then one day Mont disappears. Don't see him for about a year. And at the next family function, Mont shows up with his wife and 2 sons. Now it's a different wife, and the daughter's gone, and now there's 2 teenage boys. And it's kind of like they just changed the actor in your favorite sitcom, but it didn't change the character. Just had the guy come in. Remember Bewitched? You always had a new Darren. Every couple of years got a new Darren. For my family, it's just like that. Nobody, that's just Mont's wife. That's his kids. Don't pay any attention to them. I don't know for years what happened. And I come to find out, and the murder detectives didn't know this when they interviewed me, I come to find out that Mont had gotten drunk, got in a fight with his wife. He frequently did physical violence to his wife, and she got a hold of the shotgun and shot him, point blank in the stomach. And Mont goes off to the hospital. He goes straight through the ER into surgery where they go to work on him, and there's no reason he should have survived. He was either in the hospital or in a care facility for almost a year after that. It was real bad. He's in surgery for like 9 hours. They saved Mont's life. Mont decides going home to that wife probably isn't the best idea he ever had in his life, and he falls in love with one of the nurses in the hospital where he is. So he throws the wife out at home, and he brings the nurse and her 2 teenage boys home, and now it's Mont and his wife and his kids that we're not supposed to notice. That's what alcoholism looks like. Don't look over there. Do not talk about that. Just let it go. And now he's got a new wife. About a year after that, there's a big crisis. I'm 12. And they're not talking to us about what's going on. It's a big crisis. I find out Mont's dead. Mont's killed his wife and killed himself. That's all I knew. 25 years later, I asked my mom, what really happened with Uncle Mont? She said, well, she told me about the first wife shooting him. They lied and said he'd shot himself cleaning a gun or in a hunting accident or something. And he had been, it's a longer story than I want to get into, but he was fighting with a new wife, and she ran out of the front door trying to get away, and he chased her out with a large caliber handgun, shot her twice in the back in front of those boys, and then put the gun against his head and pulled the trigger. Now, these murder deeds have come to me to talk about this. I said, if you're come to talk about Mont murdering his wife, check the newspaper. This was like a big scandal in the North Valley. Check the paper. It's all about that. And they said, no, we're going way farther back than that. It turns out she was a year and a half on the case when I met her. They were 3.5 years, the case had basically closed when they came to my house, and they gave me the backstory on it. They showed me the murder books and everything, because I'd asked them to be there when they announced it in public, that he was a mass murdering serial rapist, child molester, and a drunk. And he had murdered some really high-profile murders that they hadn't solved, and they're just closing those cold cases now. But here's the deal. See, 2 weeks before they came to my house, we're going to come give you the final report on this. I've got no idea who the victims are. I was 2 years old when the first woman that was killed that they pinned on Mont, when that happened, I was 2. I don't know much about it. A week before they came, they gave me the names of 2 of the victims. And I went to work. I have considerable tracking and stalking skills. It's almost a superpower. By the time they showed up to give me the lowdown on this case, I've got newspaper clippings from several different newspapers spread all over my desk, including a composite drawing of the possible suspect that came directly out of the murder book from the detective's 1956 murder book for a lady named Sarah Jean Jepson. And the detectives walk in. This lady's been on the case 3.5 years, and she said, wait a minute, where'd you get that? And what I didn't say out loud is, oh, honey, I'm an Al-Anon. I've had the case for a week and a half, and I've got that. It's taken you 3.5 years to catch up. She was horrified that I had this. It had been published in a paper, and I sponsored a guy who had access, and we got it all out. So now my wife sleeps with one eye open, kind of keeps an eye on things over here, because we know what my gene pool looks like. So she gets sober. I'm not happy. She drags me to open AA meetings where I hear the music of recovery from sober alcoholics. I learn about a disease I don't have from the people that have it. I loved AA. You go to meetings, we go to coffee as a group. I don't do AA 12-step work, but God help, I love watching it happen. Because there'd be my wife and her girls in AA, a new woman would come in, especially one that's still drunk. Oh, they loved it. When they're drunk, their eyes would glaze over like the rats in the vampire movie. We'd all go to this restaurant, and they would separate her off, and all the women would go over there, and they get the long, skinny booth like this right here with about 8 chairs on each side, and they would stand there and wait until she finally caved in and got in, and they'd push her all the way to the back of the booth and completely ignore her. It's 12-step. That was a 12-step work in progress. I just loved watching it go. I can't do it, but I'm a fan watching it happen. When I go to a conference like this and hear somebody stand up here and talk, cool. I'm sober this long, I did this much, I've done these service commitments. When I see that guy at lunch in the corner with a new man, that's what I come to see. When I would go with Arbutus O'Neill to talk at a conference, I would invariably find her with a new woman at coffee in between the meetings down there somewhere doing the deal. Or we're talking about our primary mission is to carry the message to still suffering members of the alcohol families of the alcoholic, and it's what we do. So I'm attracted to it, but I don't want. I said I'd love to join AA. My wife said, "Oh, join." I said, "Don't you think there's a problem that I never really drank very much at all?" And she said, "Oh my God, I would vouch for you." My newly sober wife was going to lie to AA to get me a seat just so I'd do something. And I had heard him say things like rigorous honesty in the meetings. I'm afraid she's going to drink if she lies. That ain't going to work. And I finally caved in, and I called the Al-Anon office, and I ordered a directory, and I snuck out to the mailbox to get it first before anybody. I didn't want anybody to know I was going. I get my little directory. We got 430 meetings in Los Angeles, and I went out to go get a meeting. And the first 3 places I went to a meeting, I was the right day, at the right place, and the right time, and there was no meeting. For whatever reason, those meetings were dark, or they had moved, or the directory was wrong. There was nobody there. And man, I was this close to not going to the fourth one. I thought, well, y'all are a figment of somebody's imagination, and I would have just written it off. But that fourth meeting, I went, and I showed up, and it's a place in California. It was a church. There's an AA meeting down that end of the hallway called the Gong Show, and it's appropriately named. They're raucous, loud, laughing, having crashed the tree, crashed the car into the garage, into the pool, and smashed the Christmas tree. They're all having a great time. Those are my people down there. I love it down there. The Al-Anon meeting is that way. It's a long, dark, dingy hall in the classrooms in this church. And the last door on the left, it was the last door on the left, is the Al-Anon meeting. And I walked down there, and I looked around the corner, and it was exactly what I knew it was going to be when I got there. It was 8 little blue-haired ladies sitting in a circle with 9 chairs. And I will tell you, I looked around. If they hadn't seen me look in the door, I'd have quietly slipped out, and I'd have gone down, just faded into the back row of that AA meeting, but they saw me. It turns out in my inventory, I found out I might have a slightly overdeveloped sense of responsibility. So they saw me, and it's the Green Mile. I walked in there, and I got nothing in common with these people. I'm a guy, she's sober. I was way sicker than they. I got nothing in common with these people. I had the great good fortune of falling into the arsenic and old lace division of the Al-Anon family groups, who thought one of the 20 questions was, have you ever actively plotted the death of your alcoholic? You might need Al-Anon. They're the most twisted little old ladies I ever met. That Saturday, I picked a meeting to be in my home group, and I picked it because I'm a long-distance bicycle rider. I still am. And I'm going to ride 18 miles up to Canyon Country. I'm going to take in this meeting at 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. After it's over, I'm going to do a little 40-mile loop through the canyons and come home, get a meeting, get a bike ride. We're good. Now, I'm showing up at Al-Anon. I didn't put my hand up as a newcomer at that first meeting. I think they knew. They might know. Woo, that's crazy. I'm busy. I'm helping them set up the meeting and stuff. So I don't want to be new. I don't want you to notice me. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to pray with you. The first AA meeting I go to with her, big meeting. It was as big as this right now. Big AA speaker meeting. And I'm listening. I'm hearing. I'm liking what I hear. Talking about the steps. I think I might use some of that. Not the God stuff, but I can use some of that. And then they said the meeting's all over. They read something at the end, and we get up to leave, and I go to walk away from my chair, and an alcoholic on either side of me grabs me in my hands, holds me in place, and it says the Our Father. And part of my story is that in 1976, my little girl drowned in a 1.5 foot deep pool in my backyard. I was married to my first wife, fresh out of the Marine Corps right at the end of Vietnam. I didn't see combat. My brother did. We just lost him of this disease last year. And she spent a year in a coma in my home by my side of the bed. I grew up in a place that was testosterone driven out of the gate. My dad and my uncles were founding members of a really bad news motorcycle gang that rivaled the Angels. They were in my house every day and every weekend. Harleys and Indians parked in the driveway. People that you should have a fight or flight reaction when you see them. I don't. I grew up with them. I'm racing cars when I'm 4. I'm riding rodeo when I'm 8. I'm racing motorcycles when I'm 9. I'm racing professional motorcycles on a flat track with no brakes when I'm 13. where you're not allowed to run brakes. You're supposed to be 18. We just lied to them and told them I was small for my age. When you look at me from the outside, I look like a guy who's got some stuff going on. I got some huevos, and I got, I'm doing some stuff that would be impressive to people. And that little girl came back to my house after we got her out of the hospital after the drowning, and they put her in my ex-wife put her in a crib by my side of the bed. We had to get all the equipment to take care of her, breathing monitor, heart monitor. She's got a trach tube. She got a tube in her stomach to feed her, 24-hour-a-day constant care. Suction machine. I still can't hear a suction machine without having nightmares. To try and catch that little bubble of snot because she's strangling on her own body fluids, and you got to try and catch it with a suction machine. And I would stand at the foot of her crib and listen to the heart machine banging, and the emotions would get up where they might get away, and I have to go. I couldn't be in the room with my little girl. I couldn't be a partner to that wife, a father to that child, or to my son who was in the other room. I couldn't stay in the house. And I fled that house and I went to work instead. So I'm going to AA and I'm listening to you guys talk about the 12 steps and the powerful things, the miracles that transpire in your life. People, you recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body with the application of those steps. And I got a pretty good idea I can benefit from that. But that piece of baggage that I'm dragging about that daughter and the shame that I have behind my inability to be a man in the face of my family's desperate need for me to be that, you got nothing for that. If you're an alcoholic and you drank like Jimmy drank last night and you put that alcohol in you and for the first time you're okay and it solved your problems and you could walk around in the world and belong on the planet, good on you. It never did that for me. If I could have taken a drink to take away the feeling I had staring at that little girl's crib, or all the things that happened after it, I'd have been drunk then, I'd be drunk now, it didn't work. If you're an alcoholic, think about what would have happened when you picked up that first drink and it hadn't done what you know it did. What would you have done? My fingers in here, my nerves in here, and I got nothing to take the edge off. I'm hearing the steps in AA, and I'm thinking they're going to help, but it's not that. And I ride my bicycle up to that meeting to hide out. I'm going to be the only newcomer boy in a room with 70 women. I'm going to ride my bicycle up there, so I'm showing up in spandex to hide and be the anonymous newcomer boy in the Al-Anon meeting. So I got to have a plan. I'm always on the lookout. I got a plan. I pack a backpack full of clothes. I ride up there. I get there way before you get there. There's a meditation garden at the end of the building with a wall around it. I go in there. I take off my bicycle clothes. I put my street clothes on. I stash the bike in the weeds. As soon as the door opens, I'm in there setting up the chairs. I'm helping the literature. I'm busy. Don't talk to me. I'm fine. Ask your sponsor what FINE stands for. I won't say it from up here. I'm fine, thank you. They leave me alone. The meeting's over. I slip back out, get out of my clothes, get into my roadie gear, put my backpack on, and go do my 40-mile loop. I'm hiding out in Al-Anon, trying not to be new. 2 months in, first spiritual awakening. That's my chair. It is not my meeting. I'm 32 years around here. It will never be my meeting. If it's my meeting, I got to take control and fix it. But that's my chair. There's been occasions I've had to fight for my chair. My chair, you couldn't take it away from me. You weren't going to do it. Not because I'm a man, not because she's sober, not because I'm sicker than you. My chair to claim. On that day, I left the backpack home. I showed up as a guy who wears spandex and rides a bicycle. My friend Patty Ann walked up and she patted me on my spandex butt and she said, "Oh, you keep coming back." Now, I still don't like her too much. A year and a half of sobriety. She's on super probation. It's getting better, but it's not better yet. And they're treating me special in there. I'm thinking, if that don't work out at home, I'm home here. And I got right in the middle of you guys. I got a man sponsor, and the only guy I saw very briefly. He never worked the steps. I needed to do something. I knew not. I'd do the steps. I needed somebody who'd done it. And I asked the lady to sponsor me. Now, on the day that I buried that little girl after a year in a coma, I have a vivid memory. They put her in a little box. She was 2 years old. She's not in a big box. She's in a little box. They dug a little hole, and they put her in the ground. And I had this visual image of putting God in the ground with her. Because no God that would allow that to happen is any God of mine. To my child or any child is no God of mine. I put them both in there, put dirt on them, and I never went back. I never went back. If you knew me, you would have never known I had a child or there was a tragedy. I didn't talk about it. I don't got the tools to deal with what happens to me when that comes up. I can't do it. So I come to Al-Anon dragging that baggage and that shame, that load of shame that is insurmountable. And I get this sponsor. And she is well aware of my problems with the God thing. I heard God in that first AA meeting. I'm trying to figure out how to do them steps. I like the idea of them steps, but I got to weave through the God cones. Can't be touching them. There's 15 years in there, 13 years in there where you don't want to knock on my door to share the good news because I'll send you with your spiritual magazine worn rectally when you leave. I'm not agnostic. I'm not an atheist. I'm God antagonistic. Had a guy in one of my meetings stand up, and at the end of the meeting, we asked newcomers to share. He's got hobnail boots and a wife-beater shirt and tats, and his head shaved, and he looks angry. And the newcomer's got anything to say, and he stood up and says, "It hasn't escaped my notice that y'all are talking about God. And the only thing I want from God is for him to show up right here, right now, so I can kick his ass." And he threw some colorful language in there, which I will reserve because I'm at the podium. And he sat back down. That guy is me. In a meeting with 100 guys, he didn't get out of there without some people talking to him, giving him phone numbers and stuff. But the first number he got was mine, because that was me. My sponsor knew that. I asked her to sponsor me. I asked a woman to sponsor me. I'm the product of cross-gender sponsorship. You can make of that what you want. You got rules about it, fine. My wife has rules about it. Because of that woman, when I went up there and asked her to sponsor me, I fully expected her to say, "Oh, I'm sorry, honey, I don't sponsor no boys, no men." Instead, she gave the proper answer to the question when it's asked, "Will you work with me?" And the proper answer is, for me, no matter what, I'd be honored to work with you. We don't shoot our wounded here. I have sponsored a lot of people over the years. I have sponsored people that are on a registered sex offenders list. I don't ask them to babysit my children, but I don't throw them away. And she said, "I'd be honored to work with you." And what she did is she put me to work doing the steps exactly as outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. She was not in AA. It was what she'd done with her sponsor, is what she knew. She said, "This is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it." We got to the third step. I showed up at her house. There's a line in our Al-Anon literature that says, "At first this power may seem to be the group. But as we go in knowledge and spiritual understanding, many of us call it God as we understand him." It was good enough to open the door for me that my higher power could be her, my sponsor. It could be what you share at a meeting. It could be the other end of a phone if I have the courage to make a phone call, which would scare me to death. Had this whole thing going on in my head. I was okay with you as my higher power. But we got to that third step, and my sponsor knows that's not going to be enough, and we need to figure something out. And I'm in her little apartment, and she lays a yellow legal pad in front of me, and she says, "Write on that pad what your God looks like." I get to take God's inventory. God killed my little girl to send me a message about what a piece of crap I am. God needs me to fear him. God gives me pain to learn spiritual lessons. I wrote it down. It was awful. I wrote it all down. I did not know that sponsor who I asked to work with me was a born-again, Bible-banging, glory-eyed Christian woman who went to church every Sunday. And she never mentioned that in a meeting, not ever. If she'd have even made an oblique mention of that, I'd never even made eye contact with her, let alone asked her to work with me. And I wrote that down on the page, and I slid that over to her. She says, "What do you got?" I slid it over, and she read it, and she wrinkled up her nose. She said, "Oh, your God sucks." She tore the page off of the binder, and she wadded it up in a ball and chucked it clear across the kitchen into the trash can, 3-point range. And she said, "I'll clean it up for you." My little church-going sponsor said, "He's effing fired." I said, "Whoa, you can do that?" She said, "I just did. For non-performance of his duties, he's fired." Wow. What the hell are we going to do now? She slid the pad back over. She said, "I want you to write on that pad what God would have to look like for you to turn your life over to him without reservation, every part of it, what would that God look like? I want her to like me. I want to get an A in the test. I want to pass the class. I crossed the top of that paper, I wrote, God wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. I heard it in an AA meeting. God wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. And I literally put my pen on line 2 and could not think of another single word to write. I got the worst case of writer's block I've ever experienced. I got no idea what to write on line 2. I sit there for a minute. I'm flunking. She's never going to return my calls again. She's going to be talking about me to them other ladies at Al-Anon. I'm screwed. She said, what do you got? I said, I got nothing. She said, let me see that. I slid the pad over to her and she read, God wants me to be happy, joyous, and free. And then she changed my life. She said, that's good enough. That's God. Moving on. That was 31 years ago. In the last 31 years, I don't know one more thing about God. All I know for sure is God wants me to be happy, joyous, and free, and nothing else. On those occasions when I am not happy, joyous, and free, it's not God. I thought it was God. I thought it was God with that little girl. It's not God. It's me. My will is resurfaced. Your will is surfaced. Something's happened. It's never been God. There's not any part of my life that I can't turn over without reservation, because that's all He wants from me is be happy, joyous, and free, and nothing else. The choice not to be is mine. Called my sponsor one time. I've got a male sponsor, Willie. I talked to him this morning. He sends you his greetings. I told him something that just got me wound up tight. And he said, he launched into sponsor talk about, here's what we got to do. We're going to write this down. We're going to make this amends. Whoa. No, I'm keeping this one. I am not ready to be done with this one. I am pissed off. I got a justifiable resentment. There's no such thing, by the way. Ask your sponsor. No such thing. I'm keeping this one. And he said, oh, cool. That's all right. That's fine. You keep it as long as you want. When you're ready to be done with that, we got tools for that. I called him next day. All right, I'm ready now to clean up my crap and move on. We got to that inventory stuff, and I'm dragging that ball of shame that you guys can't touch with a 10-foot pole, and I still envy alcoholics that they could put alcohol or drugs in their body and solve that. I didn't have anything to ever take that away. It was on me every day. And I drug it into the process with the full belief that it wouldn't work, and I stand before you as evidence that it does, and it did, and it will. I wrote an amends letter in my 9th step, and I went back to that cemetery where I hadn't been in 13 years to read an amends letter to somebody who is not there to hear it. Now, we talk about that. You hear about it in meetings and stuff. They're not around. You got to write a letter and read it. Send a balloon off with a note or something. I stood on that little girl's grave and made an amends for being a terrible dad, for being unable to perform my duties as a father because I don't have the tools to deal with what happens to me, and I don't got a solution for it. And made amends to God that same day. I went up there. Every week I rode my bike up there again, and I'd clean up her grave, and I'd just sit and talk to her and talk to God, just cleaning that stuff out. Was not reachable. I could never reach it. I don't think psychotherapy could have reached it. Psych drugs couldn't have reached it. Started cleaning that stuff out. I did as thorough a job as I knew how to do. But there was going to come a day later when God understood that there was places in here that we hadn't reached yet, and there was going to be no other way to reach them. And it's a longer story than I got time to tell you, but one of my wife's sponsees, who couldn't stay sober, 5 years in and out, 4 kids. She wound up on the street with them. I took her to a halfway house. I said, I don't do AA 12-step work. You send one of your girls with me. We delivered her down to a halfway house. We took in the 2 little girls. They were 3 and 5 because they had no place to go. We don't want kids. It wasn't about kids. We were traveling. I'm working on movies, and she's coming with me. It wasn't because we were moved to have children. It was because they had no place else to go. And these little girls came into our life thoroughly torn up from the floor up by the disease of alcoholism. They got a mom who, I get up an early riser, I go in my kitchen, I start making noise, and they come running down the hallway in unison going, we're hungry, we're hungry, we're hungry. Because when they're home with mom, and mom's conscious, They need to get something to eat now because consciousness is a fleeting entity in their home. They know that when mom's awake, we need to eat right now. The active disease of alcoholism came back into her life. Those little girls, the little one in particular had diagnosis, really severe mental illness diagnosis, directly related to the fact that her mother drank and drugged when she was carrying her in utero. Eventually we got a treating psychiatrist he was the authority on pediatric bipolar. We got a diagnosis, we got to find out that's right. We go see this guy. He wrote books for the medical profession that were this wide that only had his name on the spine on pediatric bipolar disease. And he wasn't taking patients. And he took that little girl because he had never seen a female present with symptoms as severe as hers. Bipolar 1, which means violent outbreaks requiring hospitalization. ADHD, medicate this one, offend that one. There's a balancing act. Fetal alcoholism in the middle, and auditory hallucinations from the time she was 3 and persists to this day. And it's a train wreck. And what we went through, we eventually got a guardianship. She got sober for 6 weeks. Her husband took her to the bar to have margaritas to celebrate her new sobriety, and they were off on a run. And now we got kids. We got a guardianship. We had them for a year. The parents didn't come see them. We applied to adopt them, and it set up a legal battle that I could do an hour on what happened in court related to my wife sponsoring the woman and the information she shared coming back at her as accusations in court. It was horrendous. Every dime that our whole life savings went to pay for lawyers to adopt kids, and we didn't want kids. We just knew it was the right thing to do, and they had no place else to go. And that little one wound up going away. She had to be physically restrained. At the age of 9, my wife gets called to the school. They call a PET team. That's a psychiatric evaluation team. Because she's erupted. She's in a special school already. She's escaped the classroom. She's orbiting the school grounds trying to get out of the fence. My wife shows up in time to find it takes 11 full-grown adults to capture and restrain a 65-pound little girl and strap her to a gurney and medevac her to a psych hospital for drinks she didn't take and for drugs that she didn't choose. Now, we adopted them when they were 3 and 5. We took on the job. My wife took on a way bigger job than I did, of getting them educated and treated, getting them medical treatment. We were part of a treatment team and all the psych stuff going on. We were flying back and forth. They took her down to Texas for on 2 years. She was down there because they couldn't physically restrain her in California. It's against the law. They had to be able to stop her from escaping the facility or doing violence to somebody. It was awful. And she made a turnaround there and started getting a lot better. She came home back to California. She went to high school. She graduated in a preparatory high school. But her disease, like we hear around here, is progressive too. And it began to get a hold of her right after high school. And she went on the street very briefly, and they found her half naked in a drainage culvert and locked her down. She spent 1.5 years in a cell because they didn't have a treatment bed for her. If she was a male, they'd have had a bed with her for like 30 days. They'd have found a place for her to go. It took 1.5 years to get her in a treatment facility, and then 1 year there before she's now living in a halfway house near our house, and she's doing fine. And I'm telling you this because when I did the work to clean up that part of me that was so broken inside, I did everything I could do. I did everything my sponsor said. I took every action I could take. But God knew that the only way to get in there and get to the last of it was to put them little girls in my life who looked just like my daughter, little brown-haired, brown-eyed girls. I couldn't be around children for years after my daughter died, especially if they looked like her. Couldn't do it. They put them in my life to reach in here and fix a piece of me that was irreparable by any other method. And people will tell me, it was so wonderful of you to take in those kids and the sacrifices you made. It nearly cost us our marriage. It cost us our financial future. It cost us everything. I'm going to tell you, au contraire. Those little girls did more for me than I could ever possibly do for them. They think I'm the best daddy that walks the face of the planet. My husband thinks, there was a presidential election going on, I won't tell you which one, and she looked at me and she said, I think you should be president of the United States. And I said, why? And the head on the next pillow in my bedroom every night looked at me and she said, because I think you're the last honest man in America. That's not who I am. Alcoholic in an early meeting one time, going to his meetings with her, he stood at the podium and he said, my name's Jim and I'm alcoholic and I'm standing before you in an unnatural state. My natural state is to be more or less insanely drunk. But because of daily maintenance of my spiritual condition, I get to exist before you in an unnatural state. I believe then and I believe now that who I am and who I've described to you, a guy who can't be a man in the face of a desperate need of my family, who would be unfaithful to his wife, who'd do violence to you if you frighten me, or take something you've got because I think I need it, want it, or deserve it more than you, is a guy who woke up with his head on my pillow in that room this morning, every single day. My default setting is my defects of character, every single day. Without applying the things that I learn around here, so I don't have to be that guy by the time my feet hit the floor, I get out in the world amongst you, I've got to do certain things to maintain my spiritual condition. I would have bet you $1 million it would never happen 32 years ago when I came to you. I slide out of that bed every single morning and I say a prayer. I say a couple of prayers that come out of the big book. I say a prayer, I'll share it with you. God, please put your love in my heart, your thoughts in my mind, and your words in my mouth. I say that before I get up here and talk to you because it's not my talk, it's God's talk. And then I go through a list of people in my life who I know I can't help that might could use a little extra attention from God today. People in my life who can't get sober, people who have lost somebody, people who are having a health crisis. There are at least 3 people in this room that have been on my prayer list for a long time. That list is about 50 names long right now, give or take, and I do it from memory every day. I don't expect God to fix it for any of them. I do it as an exercise in being out of self. Selfish, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of the problem. That spiritual maintenance that I do is those prayers, be out of self and think of somebody else. Answer the phone. I've already been on the phone with people I sponsored today. I was on all day yesterday, so was she, talking to people she sponsors, to be out of self and think of somebody besides me, and somehow or another my life gets better. I don't know how it works or why it works, but I'm afraid to stop doing it because I don't want to give up the things I've got now. I sponsor a guy. I get a lot of people that come from AA to Al-Anon, a lot of men. I've got a large men's meeting, and they come from AA with some time. And I get it. I don't know why. I've been told that I only miss being an alcoholic by 1 6-pack. There might be a connection there. I didn't properly apply myself, I've been told. I should have been an alcoholic. I didn't make it. There's folks in this room that will agree with me. I get them. And I take them through the same book they went through to get sober in the first place. And they have a different experience with it. So I get this guy, 25 years of sobriety. He just lost his wife of 40 years. He's trying to decide why he should still be on the planet. He's seriously considering suicide. And I pull him aside, let's go have coffee. And he asks me to work with him. We do the work. And I watch him make a turn. But I also know, because of the nature of that relationship and the loss of a long-term spouse, which I've looked squarely in the face a couple of times with my wife's health, that there's going to be waves of grief that run over him that he's got nothing for, that he's just got to be in it till it's done with him. And he called me up one day, and here's what's going on at the time. My wife is in cancer treatment. She'd been for a long time. At that time, every single Friday, we would go to the chemotherapy lab, and they'd plug her into an IV, and they'd hit her with Benadryl, and she's out. And I sit with her for 5 hours in the chemo lab, checking emails, maybe I'll step out and make a phone call because I don't want to talk in the chemo lab, doing the deal, doing every Friday. And David, who is a doctor of psychology, who trained at Yale University, my 25-year sober guy that comes through to Al-Anon, calls me up. And he says, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I just called to ask you, what do you do when you're having a bad day? Because the grief was on him, right? What do you do when you have a bad day? And I thought about it and I said, David, I can't remember the last time I had a bad day. He knew he was talking to me in the chemotherapy lounge and they're dripping poison in her arm. He knows the circumstances of my life. But suffering comes when I fail to be able to accept the reality of my life. On Fridays, the reality of my life is she's got cancer. She don't got cancer on Saturday. She don't got cancer on Wednesday. On Friday, she's got cancer when the chemotherapy, and it took him a while to wrap his head around that, but he absolutely believed me because it's true. There are circumstances in my life I'd love to have different, but I don't suffer behind it because I understand that there are something I can't change. If I don't, suffering is always my inability to accept reality as it is, a fact as it is, or my efforts to change something that's not changeable by me. That's suffering every time. Pain. It's painful. It's not suffering. There's nobody suffering. There's no victims in my house. I don't know how to tell you that to get from where we were to here, except the process of the principles we've been talking about all weekend. I'll tell you one more story and I'll get off because I'm coming up on my no soul saved after 60 minutes. I'm going to cheat and tell you two. I get a guy, 15 years of sobriety, comes to me. She broke up with him. She's his higher power. He's thinking to kill himself. His sponsor has sentenced him to come to Al-Anon and gets me as a sponsor. We do a little work, do a couple of steps, and he meets a new God of his understanding, and out he goes. He comes back in a year. She's left him. He's thinking about driving into the freeway abutment on the meeting. We did this dance for 10 years. And he keeps asking me, what are we going to do? I said, I'm going to take you through the book. And he made a mention to me for this later. He said, I'm thinking, what is this snot-nosed Al-Anon boy going to teach me, a sober alcoholic, that I don't already know, taking me through my own book? And his ego wouldn't let him do it. After 10 years of doing this, he finally got done. He wasn't done till he's done. He finally got done. The big one had happened, and we went through the book. And we went through the inventory process. And we get to the fifth step, and I said, you understand now, after we've been sitting here a while, that the calls have been coming from inside the house. That it was never her. It was never them. It was never circumstances. It wasn't events. Suffering was always you. It was very clear when we got to the end of the fifth step. It was you. And we're going to do step 6. And he says, what does it mean, step 6? We're going to become entirely ready. That's a big statement. To have God remove all these defects of character. Hello, that's who I am. You take those away, I have no skeleton. I'm a puddle on the floor. That's what makes me up. I don't, maybe that one and that one. How do you become willing to have all of them go? And I asked him a question. I said, it's become clearly evident that your suffering has been you. Step 6 just asks you, are you ready to finally stop suffering at your own hand? And he fell on the floor of my office and began weeping. Because he'd done the work. He thought he understood it. He'd never done it on the level that we did, taking him through with that wider focus that we do on the Al-Anon side. And then he made amends to me for saying, I thought that snot-nosed kid going to teach me about the big book. I'm just showing him what I was shown. And I'll tell you one more story just so you know that I don't belong anywhere on a pedestal. About 3 months ago, I'm in the process of appealing a decision by the VA. I'm a disabled veteran. I was trying to change my rating with them, and I had a woman representing me. She worked for a charity, and she's doing the paperwork. And after 2 years of waiting for a decision, I found out she never submitted it in the first place, and I am spun out. This is one of those resentments that's justifiable, and I am spun out. Now, if I sponsor you and you call me up with a situation like this, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. Is there any decision to be made about this today? No. Is there any action you can take today to resolve this issue? No. Is there anything you can do whatsoever to make this different? No. Then turn it over and quit thinking about it and hang up the phone. My head is a squirrel cage. I am on fire. I'm going to sue them. I'm going to sue a charity. It's like suing the Easter Bunny, for God's sakes. But I'm going to sue them. I'm going to get them to pull her ticket. I need to do something. My first meditation I ever got in my life was riding a bicycle. I get on that bike and get my heart rate up about $180, and the voices, remember the voices? I got them too. Run out of stuff to say. They're really just huffing and puffing, trying to get air. It's the only quiet I'd ever experienced in my life. I'm going to get on the bike. I'm going to ride this off. I'm about 20 miles into the ride. My head is screaming at me, and now I'm talking out loud to myself on the bicycle at race speed. People are going wide around me on the Paseo. I ride up this big hill. People are up there, and now I'm yelling. And they all leave. All the bicycle riders having a banana. They all leave, go down the hill, and I said, God, Here's the deal. I've been telling these guys I sponsor for years to turn it over, and you can't fix it today, and let it go, and go do your job, do something else. And God, I've been telling myself all day, and I can't do it, and I'm going to need some help here, God. Still spinning. I start down this hill. I like going fast. I'm in a tuck. I get up about 40 miles an hour, a half mile downhill. I hit the flat. I ride into a swarm of bees that is so thick I can't see the other side. I am allergic to bee sting. I can't stop. I'm in the bees. I get in a tuck. I put my head down. The vents in my hat fill full of bees. I can feel them hitting all over my body. They're banging into my bicycle. I get out the other side. I throw the bicycle down. I jerk my helmet off. I throw it on the ground. They're falling out of the vents, and I'm pounding them off of me like I'm on fire. And then I stopped. And I looked up and I said, really, God? Bees? Were the locusts busy today? And then the squirrel cage stopped. It worked. I put my hat back on. I turn around. I ride back on the path to see if there's got to be a swarm of bees on a poster, and I want to see what the hell happened. There isn't a bee for 500 miles. Their work was done. So now when my guys call me all spun out, I say, don't make me send the bees. But when I say a prayer in the morning, I need God's attention about something, I say, but God, please not the bees this time. Thank you guys for the bees.